they couldn't give us the police data. We offered to pay a staff person to enter the data for them, which they didn't feel comfortable with, and just understandably. But I was basically saying, look, we can help you here. They didn't really want that kind of help, but they couldn't retrieve the data from their data system. They've since gotten a new system. Now they can do it pretty easily, but the person who has been our contact person and has been working with us for the last 7 years is no longer in that position. So now we have to figure out who do we talk to, and we haven't really found the person to get access to this data so that we can do this work. And so it's very difficult to do this kind of work in a situation where there isn't really a very strong infrastructure to kind of make it happen. And that has an effect. The other thing that has an effect is it's difficult, in these situations. We're sort of it's like a little drop in the ocean, right? With all these other kinds of pressures going on. And one of the reasons why in the Youth Violence Prevention Center, the idea is we're trying to do this full court press. We're trying to do things from many different angles. We're trying to work on changing community and as well as changing kids, high risk, low risk, interrelationships, all that sort of thing. The idea is any one of those probably wouldn't work. But in a context where there's high unemployment and obviously high violence, that's a tough hole to dig out of. And but we do what we can do. And our funding, yes, our funding gets cut from the CDC, and we try to do what we can do to make it work.
Are they being taught anything about their feelings and their emotions and what they're holding and harboring and the why?
The answer is yes, but I'm not sure to the depth that you're talking about. That's why I'm hesitating. We don't really do real psychological kind of counseling kind of work, but some of the work around ethnic identity is very much exactly that. It's to help them develop a sense of pride and a sense of that being black is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing, and there's a lot of history there. And trying to help the kids sort of have a more positive view of themselves, their community, their friends, and build from there. So. Yes, in a somewhat indirect way, I think, than what I'm reading into your question. Yeah. Okay.
Comparison area. Are you doing any intervention there, or simply collecting outcome data?
We're just collecting the data there, and actually, we're part of the survey that we're doing is that the people in that area are part of the survey. So we're not really doing anything in that area. The city is doing a lot of things in that area. Actually, it turns out they're doing a couple of things in that area. So. Yeah, will that reduce the chances that we'll find something? Yeah, but again, we're not going to say, oh no, don't do anything. That's our control area. Of course not. That's not where our heart is, and that's not what we're trying to do. If our work can't overcome one or two projects they're doing, then maybe it's not worth doing, and maybe you only need to do one or two. It's cheaper. Yeah.
Well, I'd be curious to know, how much do you utilize the school counselors in the area that you're focused in? Because it would seem to me that they could possibly identify some of the people that need to be in the program if those after-school programs have been cut due to budgetary reasons.
Well, we don't directly work with school counselors. We have some good connections in schools, and some of the staff that we're working with, works with them and talks to them, and they might direct some students to the program, but we don't work directly with them, or they're not really part of the project in that way. But they're certainly on the periphery, and we make them aware of what we're doing, and hopefully they'll tell kids in the after-school program, hey, there's this thing going on. You may not be in the intervention group, but you might want to try, because if you don't sign the paper, so they do help with recruiting some, and depending on what's going on, they in a particular school and what we're particularly doing. So for example, they might say, if they're in that area, they might say, hey. There's this YES program after school that, why don't you get involved in that? Or, there's this Fathers and Sons. I know that your father doesn't live with you anymore. There's this program. Why don't you connect with so-and-so to see about it? So that kind of thing, it does happen. I know you've had your hand up for a while, so I'm sorry.
It really seems like the program is very proactive in terms of preventing violence, but in terms of the kids who are actually court-ordered to be there, people who have already offended, do you think you're going to need to approach them in a different way, or is the intent to just kind of go forward as you're dealing with the other kids?
That's a really good question. I don't really have an answer, but I'll make one up. I mean, sometimes we don't know who's been adjudicated. I mean, sometimes a kid may come to us and they might be off probation by the time they come to us, and we don't even know they've been adjudicated. So that can certainly happen. There is also a possibility that some kids are on probation, and we might not know about that. That one piece we'll know because they've been through the courts. They have to be through the courts to get into that program, so we know they are. The other kids we don't necessarily know, and it actually poses an interesting question that we might want to ask them about that, so that we have a sense of that, and we could actually look at that question. But we don't have anything specifically for that. Well, I would say that I think we do believe theoretically that even if they've engaged in this behavior in the past, that we could break that chain. We do believe, or maybe I shouldn't say we. I believe that we can break that chain. I do believe that. I think it's a harder chain to break. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, no question about that. The most likely person to be in prison is somebody who's already committed a crime or has been in prison before. I mean, there was a whole idea of recidivism. But I do believe if we can do these kinds of things, and we're working with kids who are basically in that second decade of life, 10 to 20 years old. Yeah.
What about the primary caregiver, moms? So I know that you have a connection with fathers, but moms are equally important, especially given the fact that they spend so much time with their children. Does the program at all incorporate moms or grandparents who may be also the primary caretaker into the program?
Well, this is where I'll try to channel Dr. Caldwell. The moms are involved at some minor level at least, because the moms often are who the kid's living with, and they have to sign off, and they're often the parents signing off. And it never works if it's the father who says, yeah, I'd like to do this program, but the mom says, I don't want you near my child, right? So moms are obviously involved, but the program is actually working towards including moms and getting moms more involved in the whole part of that program. The details of that I don't know as much about, but maybe, Susan, do you know?
Well, I know that the rationale for the Fathers and Sons program actually came out of some earlier research, is that even if fathers are not living with their children, many of them are still involved at some level on their lives, but they perhaps haven't had the benefit of some of the experiences moms have had of learning how to communicate effectively with their kids, knowing who their kids' friends are. And so that's why this particular Fathers and Sons program is focused on fathers, trying to increase that connection between fathers and their kids. They do include a session for mothers and their kids at the beginning of the program, so the mothers understand what this is all about. Because in some cases, in this particular type of program, the mothers may not have a particularly strong or good relationship with the dads, but they still want their kids to know their dads and be involved, and the dads to be involved with the kids. So there is a session for moms that is part of this program. But for this particular intervention, the focus is on the relationship between the fathers and
As
the
a
sons.
follow-up, I was just thinking that the children then, if they have that connection with their moms, then after they leave the program, they can go home and communicate these experiences with their moms. But if moms are not connected in some respect, then
Right, and
that might fall on deaf ears.
That's exactly why Dr. Caldwell's working on that exact issue. Because you're exactly right.
And communication with the moms is very important, because obviously in many cases the kids are living with the moms or perhaps with a grandparent, and they need to know what's going on.
Right.
They're often the ones that are bringing the kids
Right.
to the program, so they're kept informed.
I'm loving this. I think it's so exciting that you guys have questions. It's like, it's really great. Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious with the amount of attention that they're receiving through the program, and then returning to an environment that again perhaps provides more temptations faster than you can create alternatives. How much of a wraparound effect do you try and create with the program with all other types of providers, services, other community organizations? I think one of the questions was how do you make that linkage?
Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to do in the Youth Violence Prevention Center project, where we're trying to not only make changes with the kids and then have them end up going back to a violent home, but we're trying to do things with helping kids develop relationships with other adults, or developing a relationship with their father if they're not residential, that sort of thing. And also we're trying to make help with changing community so that when they go back to their neighborhoods, maybe it's getting a little, it's rising up a little bit better. That's not necessarily focused with their kids. I should say, though, the other thing that we are doing is sometimes the kids will be involved in that Clean and Green project that is part of the land bank, that the land bank is doing anyway, and the land bank is not necessarily engaging kids in that process, but we've talked to them about, would you be open to this sometimes? And so that's exactly what we're trying to do, because we realize that if, it's kind of like when you, I don't know if anybody's ever lived in apartments where there's cockroaches, and your cockroaches expand in your apartment, you could know that means your neighbors sprayed for cockroaches because they just come to your house, right? So, so yes, we're thinking about that whole context, and we're trying to see if we can change that whole context. We're starting, and we're trying to get the kids involved in that whole process as well. That's exactly the idea. It's sort of a social ecological model, and that's kind of what's driving us. I know you're excited to ask, but other people have other questions, so I'm going to come back to this side.
Thank you for your presentation, and more so for the tremendous work that you're doing in Flint. Listening to you talking about your program's mission, I was reminded tangentially of Venezuela's El Sistema. I don't know if you're familiar with the program, where now I think over 300,000 young people are taken at young ages and put into a symphony orchestra setting. And out of the most violent, the children who are the negative beneficiaries of the most violence and drug abuse are put into the system. And they have a national youth orchestra that's done a world tour. I think their most famous person that's come out of that is Gustavo Dudamel, who's now the conductor of the Los Angeles Philharmonic since 2008, in his 20s. And I was wondering, I say that only to preface, have you considered moving forward any sort of partnership with the Flint Symphony or with the Flint Institute of Music?
I recently learned about this, and I'm trying to get my head around it to see how we could do it, and I think those are two really good ideas. But that's an example of, I think, most kids don't want to be in a situation. It's just like most people don't want to be poor, right? And so, I think if you give kids opportunity, they'll rise to it. And I think that's just another example, and that's exactly what we're trying to do on a more grassroots kind of level. I just want to come back to this side of the room.
Yeah, I was wondering when you went to schools, if you did outreach to the special education classrooms, if that was part of your outreach for all students?
Not specifically. I mean, it may have been in some schools that we didn't specifically direct that to occur. But that is another possibility that might make some sense. Our programs, depending on the disability, are not necessarily geared in that way. And so we probably need to pay more attention to that now that you raised that issue. I see, Veronica, could we keep going? I mean, I'm okay with it. Go ahead.
Well, following up, this gentleman said that unfortunately the theater's gone. The board said theater, which was a professional theater here in Lansing. We did summer programs with kids from Boys and Girls Club, Cristo Rey, etc. It was just unbelievable what happened the way these kids woke up, learned about themselves and expressed themselves and found words. And they did a little program. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. And of course, unfortunately, that's no longer. I'll never forget this. I was on the board. We had this little program. It was just incredible. We were giving them cake and punch afterwards, and this little kid was just getting down on the cake, and somebody said, "Well, you're going to ruin your dinner." And the kid said, "What dinner?"
Oh.
Well, when you go home, do you have dinner? He said, "No." Well, where are your parents? I don't know. They're not home when I get home. That's interesting. Oh my God. Well, so it's
we have similar kinds of stories.
Yeah, some of that stuff.
I mean, just to, in terms of reality like that, one time we were supposed to do lesson 4A, and there was a fight in the school earlier in the day, And the fight broke out, and the principal called the police, and the police in riot gears came into the school.